folks. This is Bob Dodrill, application engineer with Hill. I'm here again with another session on developing a project within Vodesys software for a Turk TX707 PLC. And as I have mentioned in other meetings, we use the same software for all of the Turk PLC products. For all the programmable products, we use the same software. In this one, we are using the TX, which is the HMI PLC combo. But I want you to know that I'm going to focus today on the visualization screens, or the HMI screens, if you will. And you can create visualizations even in the BL20, BL67, the TBEN block for your reference that you can always interface through your PC. It makes a nice troubleshooting page. But in this particular application, obviously we have an HMI, so we want to use our visualization screen to develop our HMI screens. I'm going to open my visualization, and I go right to my toolbox on the right-hand side of the screen, and I'm in the lamp switches and bitmap section. So these are some pre-built buttons that are within Vodesys for your use. In this case, we're just going to pick a push switch and we'll drag it over into our screen. And then we get our properties window. Well, this one's pretty simple. There's not a lot to change here. Within our variable, we can actually click on the variable. We can open this up. We can go to our global variables, which are the things that are in our physical I/O, or we can go to our application variables. And in this case, I'm just going to create this HMI start button. So we'll pull that into our screen. We also have the ability to change the color. So a start button's green, so we're going to add a green ring to this guy. So it's hard to see, but you actually get a green ring around it. So the next thing, so that's basically how you do that set of push buttons. Also within the toolbox, we have some common controls. And here's another button for your usage, and I like to use this one for my screen change. And this is one of those things that's not particular evident right in the beginning of how to create a screen change. Now, we've only got one screen here, so let's go back to our visualization. We're going to go to Application. We're going to right click. We're going to add an object, and we're going to add a visualization so we have a second screen. And this one, let's just make it our, I don't know, our start screen. That's good enough. Doesn't really matter what you call it. So now we're going to go back to the first visualization. And now we want to have the ability to change screens. So we go to our input configuration, and we say on mouse click or on mouse down, which is the same thing as your finger touch. We want to configure that. So if we configure it, we want to change the shown visualization. So if we double click on that, we get another pop-up and a lookup button. We want to go take this one to our start screen. Say, okay. Now, that's we don't really have anything in that, so let's change the name and we can call it start screen or something like that. And we know now that this is our button to go to the next screen. Now, once we kind of have that typed in, if we want to make some changes to it, if we open this text properties, we can go to our font screen, we can do a lookup, and now we have the ability to change it to some fancy font or make a change into it if that's what we want to do, and we make a size change and say okay. So now we have it a little more bold, looks a little nicer, but that's how you do a screen change button, and it doesn't matter what button you use. You would use that same format. You would go down to the input configuration and to on mouse down or on mouse click down, want to configure it to do something. Now, another thing that we have in our PLC program is we have some word variables or we have some numerical type variables, and one of those is our time value, and then we have something here that was this multiply screen that we created before. So we're going to go back to our visualization, and this time we want to create a visual box so that we can see that variable, that numerical variable. So in my case, I'm going to pull in a rectangle, but it doesn't, at this point, it doesn't really matter where you put it in the screen. Now, this is the part that may be a little different than what you're used to. So we're going to click on our text button, and we're going to tell it, hey, we want this to be a placeholder box. We want this to be either a %s would be a string value, a %d is a word or an int, and then the percent, like 5.2f, this would be a float or a real number. And the 5 just means number of digits before the decimal place, and 2 would be number of digits after the decimal place. In our case, we're just going to use an int. So we want our text to be a %d. So an int, a word, or even a time variable can be a %d. Now, once we have that in there, we do have the ability again to mess around with the fonts. So generally, it's up to you what you want it to look like. I just leave it and change the size and make it whatever size that I think will be nice and visible in my screen. Now, I'm going to go to my text variable screen. So now we're going to assign our variable. We've told it we want it to be a placeholder or a visual box. Now we want to go to our variable. So if I double click on that, do my lookup box, now I can go back to my application screen. And now look here, I have my timer 0. Now I can bring my elapsed time into my box. So now I can actually watch that timer timeout within my box. So that's how you would assign what is viewed in your box. Well, so that's kind of basic. You can't see much there. So maybe one of the things that we want to do is we want to add some color to our box. And maybe we want to say in the normal state, we want this to be blue. I don't know, light blue. Just pick a number. Now, the other thing that we kind of have the ability to do if we like it is we have this gradient color. So we can go check that, and we can actually set our gradient. So I could make it, I don't know, just pick a number here. I can make it red to white, say okay. So now my box just kind of fades away, and it's just, again, just some ways of kind of making it look nice. But that, you can play around with that box as much as you'd like, but that gives you the ability here that to see how you would view a variable. Now, I'm going to add another box. So I'm going to go back to my toolbox and add another rectangle. And this rectangle, I want to use it to change a variable. So I'm going to go into my PLC program. And right here where I have this elapsed time on my timer, or my preset time on my timer, I can actually name that. And I can call it whatever, timer 1 set. I don't know. That sounds good. And again, it is a value of time, which means you will be entering a millisecond time, because always a variable of time is millisecond. Okay. Now we're going to go back to our visualization screen, and we have our box, and we're going to go back to our properties window. Same thing again. So we have all these same things. So in our text box, we're going to do a %d to tell it that it is an integer value, or in this case, a time value. In our text variables, this time we're going to make it that we just created. So we're going to call it timer 1 set. Now, I want the ability to enter a value. So on this case, on mouse down, I want to configure it as write a variable. So I can now write this variable, and my input type, I can pick something like, let's say we want a numpad or a number pad to pop up on our screen. So when I check this, I have the ability now, it'll pop up this little screen. I can also set min and max on here. So if I wanted to say I only want my time between 1 and 10 seconds, I can write that into these min and max variables. Say, okay. So now my little box is, again, it's going to view that timer one set, but when I touch it, I get a number pad pop up so I can enter a value. That's the basic on how you do that. So that is some very basic moves in Codesys to create visualization screens. But I want to show you one more thing. So we're going to open our visualization manager. We're going to add an object, and we're going to add a web visu. Now, all of the TX panels have this ability. Now, when I create my web visu, that simply, once I did this, now all of my screens that I create, all my visualizations, are now available to me from a web browser. Okay? So this is another thing that's that simple. Now I have all the screens that I've created that are available from the web browser. I can also scale these depending on the size of my screen. I could make it a fixed size and make it an 800 by 1000 or 1000 by 800, whatever. But I can go through and scale these to match the screen of my PC. But that's kind of all you have to do. That's really all you have to do to develop that web visu. So again, basic moves. Gave you guys an idea on how to start creating visualizations for Codesys as well as the web visu. And as usual, I thank you very much for taking time to view this video, and I hope in some way it was helpful to you in creating your project in Codesys. Thank you and have a great day.